Hello and welcome to Right Host. It's September the 7th, 2016, and computer giant Dell completes the acquisition of storage provider EMC in a deal worth $67 billion US. It remains today the largest ever technology sector acquisition. But this segment of Right Host isn't about the what or the why of that, or even the when or how much. It's about the where, because EMC's head office is located in the eastern Massachusetts town of Hopkinton. And a little over 5 months later, I find myself looking out of the window of a shuttle bus, passing a road sign that says, "Welcome to Hopkinton, Incorporated 1715. I am there to take part in the town's other and probably more well-known claim to fame, because Hopkinton is the starting point of the Boston Marathon. Each year on Patriots' Day, which is the third Monday in April, almost 30,000 runners and a small army of organizers, volunteers, and spectators descend on this town, which normally has a population of less than 20,000. Directed and marshaled with the military-like precision that comes from over a century of experience, the runners are channeled through corrals and released in multiple waves, beginning with the mobility-impaired starters, followed at regular intervals by the push-rim wheelchair divisions, hand cycle participants, elite women and men, then 4 successive waves of general runners, each with color-coded bibs. I am in the final wave, scheduled to start at 11:15 a.m. My bib is yellow and my number is 24906. At this time of the year, the local weather can vary from winter chill to summer heat, but today it's pleasantly mild and sunny, and the air is electric with excitement and anticipation. The horn blows, and I take the first step on the 26.2 mile, 42.2 kilometer, 40,000 step journey to downtown Boston. It's a supreme feeling, something I could never have imagined 5 years earlier on a cold January evening when I had my first running lesson, which left me gasping for breath and doubting my sanity. Or even 2 years earlier, when I ran my first marathon and swore I would never ever subject my body to such an outrage again. But here I am, the Boston Marathon at age 70. How did this happen? Well, as I've mentioned in a previous slice entitled 42.2, the journey actually begins 10 years earlier, in the summer of 2007, with an unexpected phone call from my daughter Andrea.
Hey Dad, what are you doing on October 14th?
And so we walk the Toronto Marathon, and I am hooked. Before long I am signing up for every race I can get to, and over the next 4 years I walk 29 half marathons. I do some shorter races too, sometimes joined by Andrea and grandkids Josh and Emily. One time we ran a 5K through the Toronto Zoo under the curious eyes of llamas, camels, and giraffes. From Aurora to Oshawa to Oakville, from Mississauga to Markham, from Toronto to New York City, I walk courses in the town and the country, on paved roads, pathways, and dirt trails through residential neighborhoods, main streets, and industrial estates. I walk on parkland and golf courses, once on an operational runway at Downsview Airport, literally under the noses of parked jet aircraft, and once through Central Park and down Broadway in Manhattan. I walk on hot, cold, and wet days in calm and windy weather, and one time I am caught in a torrential downpour on a country road. I am wearing my usual shorts and short-sleeved running shirt, and the rain is cascading off the peak of my hat. I am at the same time saturated and exhilarated. I love every minute of it. I walk in races with thousands of entrants, and others with less than 50. From time to time I achieve top 3, or even first in my age category. But that is tempered somewhat by my sometimes being the only entrant in my age category. Over time, I begin to notice a pattern to my race performance. Runners and walkers are typically mixed in together at the start, so as you would expect, the walkers tend to be toward the back of the pack in the early stages. But as the race progresses, runners can tire and slow down, sometimes even to a walking pace. So it isn't unusual for me to eventually overtake some runners, and I have to admit that I do derive great satisfaction from doing that. One day, as I stride past two fatigued runners who have been in my sights for some time, one of them turns to the other and exclaims, "I can't believe I'm being passed by a fucking walker." Now I should mention that in my younger days I always disliked running, and at this point in my story I'm still harbouring that historical distaste for it. But now that I'm outperforming some runners, I'm starting to wonder what it might be like to up my game to that level. After all, I have enjoyed running a few shorter races with Andrea and the kids. Perhaps it's time for me to break through to a new level. So in late January 2012, as I'm browsing the Running Room website for some clothing, I noticed that they have a beginner's running class, meeting 3 days a week at a local store to prepare novices to run a half marathon in just 12 weeks. If I'm going to do this properly and not injure myself, I realize I need to take lessons, and the class starts tomorrow. I bite the bullet and enroll, and dutifully show up at the Thornhill store for the first class. After an orientation preamble in the store, Bob, our instructor, announces that we are going to do an easy 5K, as he puts it. He explains that we will use the 10 and 1 technique, run for 10 minutes, then walk for 1. And then, to my horror, the group of about 20 people is led out of the door and into the cold late January night air. I have dressed in my normal spring to fall running kit because I assume that the classes will be held indoors. It is, after all, winter in Canada. But despite the initial shock, I quickly learned that your body heats up fast when running at pace, and the pace Bob sets for his so-called easy 5K is way faster than the easy 5Ks I was used to. I am gasping for breath at the end of the first 10-minute running segment. I'm praying for each 1-minute walking break to last longer. Nevertheless, it does get a little easier toward the end. I think I can handle this. As the weeks pass, I begin to appreciate the incremental nature of the training. By the end of February, we are doing almost 12K. By the end of March, 18K. And soon I can relatively comfortably run my first practice half marathon, 21.1 kilometers. As advertised, 12 weeks after the class start. And I've also added snow and ice to my repertoire of conditions and learned how to dress accordingly. In early May, I successfully complete the Mississauga Half Marathon, and I do it on my own terms. I have never enjoyed the technique of alternating 10 minutes of running with 1 minute of walking. Somehow that doesn't seem like true running to me. So I ditch the 10 and 1 and instead run continuously for every step of the way and cross the finish line feeling like a real runner. And that sets the pattern for running every single step of 6 more halves that year, 5 of them in a 7-week period from late September to early November 2012. And some 5Ks thrown in for good measure. I'm loving it, baby, and astounding myself in the process. And I've started to notice something else. You see, many half marathons run at the same time as marathons and over the same initial course. At some point, usually near the half marathon finish, there's a fork in the course which will be well signposted and manned by course marshals, who will yell out something like, "Full marathon to the right, half marathon to the left." I, of course, take the left fork and celebrate as I push across the finish line in times which are now about 2 hours, give or take a few minutes. But I can't help admiring these apparently superhuman beings who go right. I can't even imagine their psychological commitment, let alone how they summon the physical stamina to complete that distance. But over time, I guess through a mixture of curiosity and envy, I begin to think that maybe I could try it. It's starting to become an itch that I need to scratch, and yes, it would be great to brag that I did it. Just once. So, in May 2014, I line up on the start line for the Good Life Toronto Marathon. I look around, take a deep breath, and then we're off. My strategy is simple. I will just run a half marathon twice. I will run every step. I will run at the pace that my body allows, and if I get hurt, I will stop. At first, everything is going to plan, and I'm feeling comfortable. And then I'm approaching the fork. I see the signs, I hear the shouted instructions, and then I have done it. I have taken the right-hand path for the first time, a leap into the unknown, the road less travelled, or to be exact for me, it's the road never travelled. But the exhilaration I feel at breaking into this exclusive club is short-lived. I am getting progressively more tired. My legs become heavier and heavier, my steps shorter and shorter, and now I'm the one who's being passed by walkers. Not racers, just people walking along the side of the road. But I do manage to run every step of the way, even if those final steps are teeny tiny ones. I cross the finish line in 5 hours and 11 minutes. It has been unspeakably hard, but I have not hurt myself in the process, and I can forever say that I did it. Just the one time. It's out of my system. I will never put myself through that again. Right? Well, the famed author Malcolm Gladwell was a champion runner in his younger days. He theorized that a normal, sensible person wouldn't put themselves through the ordeal of repeating an agonizing experience because they would remember the pain and avoid repeating it. On the other hand, there are those who somehow manage to forget the pain, or at least the acuteness of it, and this characteristic allows them to continue past what is sensible. Now, he was talking about elite athletes, and I'm certainly not one of them, but I could identify with that theory because I've often found, with a few notable exceptions, that shortly after completing a race, however arduous, that within a few minutes I would feel ready to go again, and the toughest moments are already beginning to fade from my consciousness. In the next race, I inevitably come to an aha moment, where I suddenly remember why I swore I would never do this again, only to forget again once the race is run. So I do it again a few months later, and yes, it's not as bad as the first time. I check my time, and a ridiculously audacious idea begins to germinate in my mind. Actually, insane would probably be a more apt adjective. Nevertheless, in my third marathon run, with my family cheering me on, I crossed the finish line of the Toronto Waterfront Marathon in front of City Hall in a time of 4 hours, 18 minutes and 59 seconds, which qualifies me for the 70 to 74 age group of the 2017 Boston Marathon and earns me my welcome to Hopkinton and my yellow race bib. And now, as the fourth wave sets off, I continue to marvel that I am here, but pretty soon my body slips into its familiar steady routine. It knows what it needs to do in these early stages, so I turn control over to it. I know from experience that later on I will have to be more assertive as it begins to protest, and in the end I would likely have to whip it into submission to do my bidding, metaphorically speaking, of course. But for now, my body and I are just taking one step after another in harmony and enjoying the moment. Very quickly, our route takes us out of town, and the excited hubbub of the start is replaced by a rural quiet, punctuated only by the sounds of steady breathing and the rhythmic slap of hundreds of pairs of rubber-shod feet making contact with the tarmac. But that quiet doesn't last long, because the route takes us through 8 towns, and as we pass through Ashland, Framingham, and Natick, the crowds turn out in force to cheer us on. They carry signs, they bang drums, they yell encouragement. There are bands playing and boom boxes blasting. There are also hundreds of children standing on the side of the road with their palms outstretched, hoping to receive a high five from runners as they pass. And I decide to oblige every one of them. I love the look of delight on their faces. Sometimes they say thank you. Oftentimes their parents do. I'm starting to appreciate the sense of ownership and pride in this event that these communities feel. I'm contributing to that, and it adds another element to my delight in being here. And now we're in Wellesley, and I can hear from a long way away that we're approaching the famous Wellesley College Scream Tunnel, where the hooting and hollering students at the all-girls college line up with signs that say, "Kiss me," or more creatively, "Kiss me, I'm a redhead," "Kiss me, I'm half Asian," or "Kiss me, I just finished my thesis." 2 that appeal to me are, "Kiss me, I'm Jewish," and "Kiss me if you're a grandfather." Nevertheless, I decide to resist the temptation. But a runner to my right seems overcome by the moment, and with a strangled yell half leaps over the police barrier and falls into the crowd. He seems determined to take advantage of these kind invitations. I'm not aware of his fate. At the halfway mark and into the town of Newton, and on up the infamous Heartbreak Hill. By now, me and my body are starting to have some serious discussions about who's in charge here. But we reach an understanding and make it to the top, continuing past Boston College into Brookline, the upscale suburb of Boston, where President John F. Kennedy was born. Here, the subway trains run like streetcars along a central reservation on Beacon Street, and the passengers yell and wave encouragement through the windows. As I approach the 24-mile mark of the 26.2, I am in heated internal argument with my now openly defiant body when suddenly my attention is distracted by the sound of my name being frantically called and arms waving from a segment of the noisy crowd over to my left. To my delight, it's wife Madeline, daughter Kim, and her hubby Mark and grandkids Tora and Riley. I change course and slap hands with them as I run, stagger, stumble past them. About 200 yards further on, while I'm still savouring their yells of encouragement, my body suddenly decides that my legs should turn to rubber and that I must stop this nonsense now. But I continue anyway and bargain with it for just one more step, and then another, until it finally gets fed up with challenging me and stands aside to allow me on my way into Boston proper. Past the landmark Citgo oil sign and Fenway Park, where the Boston Red Sox have defeated the Chicago Cubs 6-2 that morning. And now the final turn onto Boylston Street with Boston Common in the distance. The finish line is now in sight. The street is lined with cheering spectators. I pass the point where 3 of them were killed and 281 injured in the bombing just 4 years earlier. The announcer is calling out the names of runners as they approach the line, but I'm oblivious to all of this. I am focused completely on dragging my unwilling legs those last few yards. Later, I learned that I run past Andrea and Josh, who have been screaming my name at the top of their lungs, but my focus is so intense I can't hear them. I don't even hear the announcement of my finish. And then I'm over that broad blue painted line and it's done. And as I trot to a stop, someone puts a ribbon with the finisher's medal around my neck. It's my slowest marathon yet, but that makes no difference. I've enjoyed and savoured every step, however arduous, every car horn salute, every child's hand slap, every cheer. It has been a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Right? Well, not quite, because I managed to qualify again the following year. And in contrast to the warm conditions of 2017, the 2018 weather is among the worst on record, with freezing rain and high biting Atlantic wind blowing into our faces for practically the entire race. For protection, I wear a plastic bag over my kit with cut-out holes for my head and arms. It doesn't keep me dry, but it does act as a bit of a windbreak and trap some of my body heat. That year, many runners, particularly the elite ones trying for personal best times, drop out. And there are emergency warming stations along the route for those who need them. I do not. I also don't need to visit any of the roadside porta toilets when I need to take a pee. It's much easier and delightfully warming, if only temporarily, to do it on the run. In the final few hundred yards on Boylston Street, I throw off the trash bag so as to look better for my finishing photo, and pay the price for that as a few minutes after crossing the line, I go into hypothermia, shivering uncontrollably and needing to be warmed with blankets and plied with hot coffee. I recover quickly, but on reflection I realize that this is my body's revenge for the way I have shamefully abused it. I don't blame it. It has done this to me once before. 4 years earlier, when completing a rare evening 30K race, labelled a Midsummer Night's Run, I decided to sprint the last 100 meters to overtake another runner and end up on my back under treatment by paramedics in the medical tent, with Madeline anxiously clutching my hand. No lasting harm was done, but from that time on, Madeline has always sent me off in a race with the reminder,
"Don't do anything stupid."
And now, my greatest and most literally long-suffering supporter is in downtown Boston, cold and wet in the most awful conditions, and clutching my hand again while helping me through another after-race breakdown. Fast forward 5 years. It's July 2023. I'm still running regularly and loving it every bit as much as I ever have. Looking back, I wonder what my then 60-year-old running-averse self would have made of the idea that in the next 16 years he would complete almost 200 races, including 18 marathons, 2 of them in the most famous venue in the world, and over 100 half marathons. And that would span a 2-year period where the world would shut down for a pandemic. He'd probably turn to his wife for advice, and she'd probably shake her head, ponder on all of the crazy ideas she has had to endure with him over the years, and then with a sigh say something like, "If you really want to do it, go for it, but..."
Don't do anything stupid.
I never would, of course. But something totally insane? That's another matter. And now for the story behind the story. Legend has it that in 490 BC, a Greek foot soldier by the name of Phidippides is dispatched to run across the plains of Marathon to Athens, a distance of about 25 miles, with the news that their vastly outnumbered forces have won a remarkable victory over the invading Persians. As he enters the city and approaches the elders, he gasps, "We have won!" and promptly collapses and dies of exhaustion. Sadly, there are no paramedics available to help. Now, there is a debate about the historical accuracy of this story, but Robert Browning writes a poem about it in 1879, which becomes popular through the social media of the day, which they call books. And so, in 1896, when the first modern Olympic Games are held in Athens, they create the marathon as a uniquely Greek flagship event, which fittingly is won by a Greek. The US Olympic team manager that year is a Bostonian who is so impressed that he returns home and organizes his own version, which occurs on April 19th, 1897, exactly 120 years to the day before my first Boston run. It has a field of 15 men. When the marathon distance is eventually standardized in the 1920s, the Boston start line is moved about 2 miles west from its original start at Ashland to Hopkinton, where it remains today. So, if that hadn't happened, this story might have been entitled, "Welcome to Ashland." There's a plaque there today with the inscription, "It all started here." Which is a great way to bring this full circle. As for me, it all started here with that call from Andrea.
Hey Dad, what are you doing on October 14th?
So it was only fitting that she was just a few feet away when I crossed that finish line for the first time. And doubly fitting that Josh was with her. Because starting when he was 8, Josh and I had run almost 30 races together, ranging from 5Ks to half marathons. At first we would trot along side by side, and I would drop back to let him run ahead in the last few meters. But by his early teens, those days were long gone, and he had developed into a strong runner, several times winning or placing highly against much older boys in his category. One of my fondest memories is of the Niagara Falls half marathon in October 2016. After the first couple of kilometers of tranquil running alongside the Niagara River, he asked if I minded him going ahead, and I, of course, told him to go for broke. Off he scooted, eventually disappearing into a pack of runners in the distance. I never did catch him. He was 14, and I was 1 day short of my 70th birthday. Until next time, this is Rye Toast.